Welcome to the Gavel. I'm Linda Kibe. It's been 2 months since the Students' Loan Bill was signed into law by President Bola Tinubu in the very early days of his administration. There have been questions as regards the practicability and execution of this program. Now, the House of Representatives set up an ad hoc committee to examine how this law will be executed and to engage with relevant stakeholders on the concerns raised pertaining to the law. The committee sat during the week and held discussions with some professionals on the grey areas in the legislation. It's been 2 months since the Students' Loan Bill was signed into law by President Bola Tinubu less than a month after assuming office. Since then, reactions have trailed the execution of a law considering the requirements for attaining the loan. The President set up a committee for the review of requirements and eventual takeoff of the loan scheme.
Chief of Staff.
The House of Representatives also set up an ad hoc committee following a motion to address the concerns of Nigerians and ensure the smooth implementation of the scheme. The ad hoc committee met with the CBN and the Ministry of Education during the week and questioned the rise in school fees following the signing of the bill into law by the President.
We think that this school fees increase was a preemptive move by the universities across the country in anticipation that government was about to pump in resources into the student loans program.
Tuition by all federal universities is free. What students pay, and some of us also did when we were going to school, were charges. We all know tariff rates have gone up for light. We all know that accommodation, most universities now cannot even afford to build houses. So they go into private partnership with some developers.
The committee also questioned the delay in the implementation of the scheme and requested for a commencement date.
Since May, this is August 15, and you are still working at technical whatever. What are these technicalities? That is the crux of the matter. It's too slow. You are making at a snail speed, and that's not what the Nigerian students are waiting for. And you know them.
It might not be 100% catchment, but the loan is going to start in the 2023-2024 academic session. Importantly, sir. Sorry?
Which starts when?
It can be October, it can be November, depending on the school.
Application from beginning to disbursement will actually be from the push of button. Nobody is going to be carrying paper around.
Nigeria is far below. I think we're one of the lowest in Africa in funding education as a ratio to our annual budget and our GDP. So what we need to be looking at in the country is how to increase this budget of education funding from the 1% being proposed in the Act to maybe 3%, so that we can be sure that there is enough funding to fund this program.
Committee members asked for an increase from 1 to 3% of all profits accruing to the federal government to fund the scheme, while looking towards a summit at the end of the month to receive contributions for amending the Act to ensure successful implementation of the Students' Loan Act. Meanwhile, the Registrar of the Joint Admissions and Matriculations Board, JAMB, Professor Ishaq Oloyede, has defended the decision of a commission to employ 300 staff without advertising the positions. Professor Oloyede says the decision was to fill vacancies created because of requirement of staff. He stated this when he appeared before the House of Representatives Ad Hoc Committee investigating employment racketeering by ministries, departments and agencies and mismanagement of the Integrated Payroll and Personnel Information System IPS. The committee also observed that 14 individuals at the Federal Character Commission received salaries through IPS without being placed in any federal government agency.
In 2018, we sought all the permissions requested and we followed the due process in recruiting 150 persons as replacement of those who have left. And also in 2021, we also replaced 300 who had left, and these are also contained in the paper before you. If we were to advertise for the 300, we wouldn't even be able to meet what we needed them for. If you, I call your attention to the letter we wrote to the agencies. That was the period that we had about 12, 13 centers coming on board, and we needed to man them. We felt that even if we were to advertise, that would be 6 weeks. By the time we finish the 6 weeks of advertisement, the exam itself will have gone. It's time-bound.
A public strategy firm held a health summit recently in partnership with advocacy groups in the civil space to discuss taxing sugary drinks and other fiscal policies for healthcare financing. Now, according to the group, Nigeria's health system is burdened with rising cases of non-communicable diseases, which it says are linked to the consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages. We had a chat with a senior advocacy, governance and outreach specialist, Shirley Ewang, to discuss this issue.
Nigeria is one of the highest consumers of SSBs in the world. So sugary drinks, as we know it, we are the 4th highest consumers of sugary drinks in the world. And sugary drinks, they're loaded with a lot of sugar and they offer no nutritional value whatsoever. So if you think of it, we are consuming a lot of these drinks, and on the flip side, we are recording a high, staggering amount of non-communicable diseases like cancer, type 2 diabetes, obesity, high blood pressure. And the truth is that a lot of these diseases are linked to consumption of sugary drinks. It has to do with our diet. It has to do with, our attitudes towards food and the consumption of food. So if you look at these two statistics side by side, you would see that there is a link. There is a strong link between sugary drinks consumption and NCDs, which are non-communicable diseases. And the WHO recommends, fiscal policies like taxation in order to curb the consumption of these drinks. So it's supposed to yield a positive health outcome where people are not consuming as much, thereby they're not, taking in a lot of these drinks that lead to all of these unfavorable health outcomes. So that was really the basis of this entire policy advocacy project, because Nigeria needs a thriving population.
Now, speaking of taxing and sugary drinks, your organization, in collaboration with some CSOs, are asking that the taxation for sugary drinks, sugary beverages, be increased to 20%. Tell us about this target. Why this target?
Okay, that's a very good question. So currently, Nigeria has an excise tax of 10 naira per litre. So that takes us up to about...
on sugary beverages.
And that takes us up to about 6.7%. Now, it's important to note that this is quite below the global standard. SSB taxes have been implemented in over 100 countries. So Nigeria is not the first country that's doing this. I mean, we have South Africa that has recorded a lot of positive outcomes, both in revenue and in decrease in consumption, which means that their health is doing much better in terms of the public health and the population. I think they generated over $140 million within the first year of implementation. So it's important that the tax gets up to a standard that would actually lead to improve health outcomes. And according to global practices, and the WHO also recommends at least a 20% tax.
Now, there's been some pushback, from different interest groups, companies too, about this 20% tax. Some are saying this would make the prices of this commodities, these products, go astronomically high. And so looking at it with the removal of subsidy, which has, jacked up the cost of services and goods. Do you think this is feasible? A 20% increase in tax on beverages, sweet beverages. Do you think it's feasible now? Can Nigerians bear this extra burden?
Yes, I think that it's very feasible because, first and foremost, the argument and the pushback is very normal. If you look at case studies of countries and different, similar campaigns on advocating for a tax like this, the narrative is the same, that it's going to affect job losses and it's going to, do all these things to the economy. But like I mentioned, if you take South Africa, that's proven, tried and tested, that's far from it. And really, if we're thinking of it, the tax is not punitive. the tax is actually protective. So if you think of, it's a protective measure, we're protecting Nigerians. Like I mentioned earlier, we don't want a case whereby even our kids that are going to schools and drinking SSBs every day would have to battle with obesity. Obesity also links to cancer and diabetes and all of these other really, really, terrible non-communicable diseases. And like I mentioned, our health system is underfunded, grossly underfunded. A lot of Nigerians, poor Nigerians, low, middle income, even rich Nigerians, you find that they can't really afford to have quality health care. And if you think of all of the diseases that we're battling with, or our health systems are battling with right now, are non-communicable diseases spurred from high consumption of these drinks, spurred from, unhealthy diet. So if we think of it really from a health perspective, it's super important for us to take that angle because, like I mentioned earlier, health is truly wealth. And if we're not healthy, we can't be productive. So I think that it's feasible. And on the flip side, it's really one way to generate a lot of income for the country.
So I know one of the demands of, after the summit, one of the takeaways was that the revenue gotten from this tax be plowed back into the health sector. What specifically would you want this revenue to do?
Okay, so I mean that's a very good question, and I think that we can explore different things. But one thing that we're trying to do as a coalition, because this advocacy is under the auspices of the National Action on Sugar Reduction Coalition, and one thing that we're trying to do is to work with other stakeholders to really consolidate and decide on where we would like the revenue to go to. But from our interim discussions, health and nutrition programs, because a lot of awareness campaigns are important in order to further shed the light on how what we eat, what we drink, really affects us in the long run. And that's something that we see as a gap right now in Nigeria. So that's also one proposition. Falling back to the example of South Africa, for example, their tax is called a health promotion levy, and they use the funds for health promotion, activities. So
the advocacy is also calling on the National Assembly to enact a law, as regards this SSBs. What taxing this SSB? Is this something like the Finance Act? What specifically do you want the National Assembly to do in this regard?
Okay, so while, I think it's important to say that we applaud, the federal government of Nigeria and the Ministry of Finance for just taking these steps that are going to help, public health in Nigeria and drive down the NCD's rates by enacting introducing the SSB tax through the Finance Act. But the thing with the Finance Act, it really leaves it to a lot of opposition and unfavorable amendments. We had a case where the tax was going to be increased to 20%, but, because of, the pushback, like you rightfully mentioned, it was sustained at 6.7%, which is a 10 naira per litre tax. So we think that in terms of sustainability mechanisms for this important, important policy, we would like to take it through the legislative route. That way, it's a standalone legislation and it doesn't have to necessarily be reviewed every year like the Finance Act, goes through the review every year. So that's really what we are, proposing.
So legislation from the National Assembly to set the tax rate for SSBs.
Yes, and we want it to be an all-encompassing legislation, but yes, essentially just for sustainability purposes.
And so, what is the organization and the coalition actually doing about this? Are you bringing this in terms of a private member bill? Or going through the executive to come out as an executive bill, or sponsoring a legislation in this regard? How are you approaching this particular, request?
Okay, so at the Health Summit, this is just one of our demands, and we're making these demands to the government. So right now, what we're trying to do is we're seeking advice and just trying to hear different key stakeholders and what they have to say so that we can align and take collective action. So nothing has been done, nothing significant has been done. Like I said, it's just one of the coalition's, key demands or positions, and we would like the government to consider what we're proposing.
You're welcome back to the Gavel. Now, before the Senate went on recess, a federal lawmaker, Senator Abamuru, raised a motion calling on the Senate to intervene in what he deemed are unfair employment practices, where some employers place age requirements as a precondition for employment. Now, after the debate, the Senate urged the Federal Ministry of Labor and Employment to immediately draw up policies that relate to equality and opportunity and treatment in access to employment at all levels. Now, we had a chat with Senator Abamuru, who still feels very strongly that the federal government needs to take a second look at the age requirements placed by employers of labor.
My constituents and many young people in Nigeria have been worrying me about getting them employed. Some who have graduated for upward of 13 years now, 15 years, some for 10 years, we've been there. And of course, they keep adding up. And while those who have graduated 13 years ago don't have jobs, people are being graduated on a yearly basis. And some even confessed to me that they had to go back to school on and on, go back to do their masters, hoping that the economy will open up, space will open up for them to get employed after their master's degrees programs. And they're not finding the jobs. Some have gone as far as going to do their PhDs. They are not finding the jobs. And so what it meant, therefore, to me was that the job space kept shrinking, or the number of persons that come out every year to meet with those who have been graduated years back cannot easily get fixed by the Nigerian economy. And here in Nigeria, government job is the only job. Unlike other climes where government creates the enabling environment by investing in infrastructures to create space for people to be employed, we don't have such here. And so what it meant, therefore, is that we are getting a greater volume of graduates, of young men roaming the streets without jobs than there are available spaces for jobs. And so if the dynamics of the employment situation changes to the level that people are no longer getting gainfully employed after graduation, it means that our existing policies must change with the dynamism of the time. And so I felt that to accommodate the Nigerian young men and women who are caught up with the age practices, we just have to adjust our age requirements for employment, even for retirement. That is what the present predicament of our young men and children and women had indicated. And so that is why I moved that motion to provide for adjustment in the requirement of age for employment and retirement, with the hope that I am going to follow it up with an amendment to enabling labor laws in Nigeria. I wasn't advocating for imposing employees on employers. I said that the requirement for employment as it is now must be adjusted to accommodate the reality of our time. It's not an imposition. Labor laws and regulations are set by human beings. And if you look at the labor law, I'm not precisely sure of when it was amended, but it definitely could not have been amended in the last 2 decades. Yet societies are changing. Times are changing. In the public sector, for instance, especially in the academia, there are adjustments of age limits for retirement. Now retirement is moved from 60 to 65. Based on the realities on ground. The ages of judges retiring from service have been adjusted to about 70. And so times change, situations change. And the reality on ground is that unlike before, when the age limit was 25, 28 for us to get employed in the public sector, and it has a concomitant effect on the thinking and policies of the private sector. It has a boomerang effect on the practices in the private sector. And so we are now saying, fine, things are changing. You no longer can get employment immediately you get graduated. And if you can get employment immediately you get graduated, in order to keep body and soul together, you must get employment, or you must find the enabling environment. So it is a whole gamut of a holistic approach to solving the problems of idleness, of unemployment, by, first of all, creating the enabling legal framework within which you can be denied employment.
On Constituency Focus this week, we spoke with a federal lawmaker representing Kogi Central, Senator Abubakar Ohere, on how he intends to address the unemployment problem in his constituency.
First and foremost, we must improve on the business and economy of Kogi Central. And the only way we can do that is to make sure our people, women, youth, are heavily engaged doing something, either through skill acquisition or skill enhancement programs, which of course we have started in the last 2 weeks. The way I'm looking at it, there are existing skills that people are already used to, such as maybe laundry work for organizers. Some are into catering work. Some are into maybe barbing. Some are into soap making, and lots of more that we can help them to standardize the way of practicing it. Then apart from earning more money for themselves, they can also train others on this business. We are looking at this. Then we also try to improve on transportation business, that is, movement of goods and services from one place to another. Then in doing this, we want to make sure we update the skill of our drivers, those who are into driving business. Then we are going to also provide some revolving loan scheme to help these drivers, so that oftentimes you see some of them, they will be out of work, probably because of they don't have tires, don't have battery, or little thing that can make them off the road. We are going to put up, I'm already discussing with the union of the drivers, so we will have a sort of revolving loan scheme that we will set aside for them. If you have such challenge, you go there and quickly you fix your whatever it is, then you move on. That one is also there. Then back to farming, which is the major occupation of my people. So we are also trying to see what we can do to improve extension services, especially to the farmers. So these extension services requires also some level of training, so that you don't depend on government alone to do what they need, how to cultivate their land, the soil fertility test, and so many things they need to do, the type of fertilizers they can utilize. All those trainings we need to go into it to improve farming activity as well. Then the issue of, for instance, mineral deposit in my area, we are already putting up arrangement into place to train some of our youths on how to go about the oil dressing process, such that by the time we start proper excavation, there's what we call artisanal mining. So we're going to form them into cooperative, so that these youths, they will have cluster of this cooperative. They can go into mining operation, obtain licenses, either to run a quarry or to run a mining lease or whatever it is. So they will be in a association form. Then we train them such that they can carry on with the mining business. This one is also going. So there are a lot of openings that we are doing, and we will keep doing them until we are satisfied that they have adequate and the maximum advantage of my presence here as a senator. Those we train, they spend 15 days for the training. At the end of the training, we give them some seed materials to go and start the business. And we also make provision of some money that is given to them to make them run through like a month before they can stand on their own. So definitely, if we train you, we give you equipment, and we give you financial support as well. Beyond the normal constituency office that we are used to, we are taking this representation to a bar. I have met with the traditional rulers in my constituency and the 58 wards that constituted the senatorial zone that I'm representing. We are going to have a representation from each of these wards. Then this representation will be the liaison officer between me and the ward, not constituency now. Then whatever I'm going to do, I will send it through the representative to the ward in conjunction with the traditional ruler, that the most senior traditional ruler that is in that ward. If they are sending anything back to me, it will come back in that format. Then I now have a constituency office in Okene, where all these informations will be harnessed.
This is where we draw the curtains on this week's edition of The Gavel. If you have any views on any of the issues discussed, please email us on thegavel@channelstv.com. Thank you for staying with us, and see you again next week.